I'd like to address a topic that I get a lot of questions about. The topic is why black men date or marry white women, or date or marry white women exclusively. I've also seen this a lot on the internet, and it's troubling. If you ask black women, you'll hear many black women say, well, black men hate black women. And if you've heard some of the things I heard on YouTube and on the internet, you would be hard pressed to prove these women wrong. Some of the things that a lot of these black men say are atrocious about black women, but I don't think that this is why black men date white women. I think that it starts in the home. I think that most people know that black women raise black sons. They raise black men. And I don't think it's the question of, well, women can't raise men, or it takes a man to raise a man. I think that that's ridiculous. I think it's ludicrous. And I think black women have been raising black men long enough that it's, and women have been raising men long enough that it's flat out false and a lie to say that women can't raise men. But I think the issue is that in our communities, we have lower economic status. We have very depressed communities. And when you live in a depressed community and your mother is the person who is raising you, you start to see that woman as struggle. And I think black men have started to see black women, and have for a long time seen black women as struggle. Not as bad people, but as people who intrinsically have to struggle. Because let's face it, everything is not paid for. Everything is not there. And so when you see your mother and your sister and your grandmother and your aunt struggle, that's who you associate with struggle, particularly when you watch television and you see white faces doing well and flourishing, and you see your primary caregiver as having to have 2 and 3 jobs to pay the bills. That's struggle. A lot of black men say that they have bad attitudes, but I think that if you would have to struggle, you might, if it's true that black women have bad attitudes, you might have a bad attitude too if you have to have 3 jobs to pay the bill and you have to deal with racism and you have to deal with sexism. You might have a bad attitude too. I think the second problem is that in our communities, we don't have a high degree of self-love. I'd say we have a low degree of self-love. We idealize whiteness, and what we really idealize is non-blackness. And so we love straight hair, long hair, we love white type hair, if it could be called that, but straight hair certainly, because most people have straight hair, well, at least so it seems. I don't know if that's actually true. But we like straight hair, we like light eyes, we like light skin. We don't like big noses. We like all the things that are not natural to us and are natural to other people. That is rough. And so when you're raised thinking that what you look like is not sufficient, and that the people who look like you are a constant source of struggle, they have to constantly struggle, you're going to want to survive by not engaging in relationships with those people. And I don't think that everybody thinks it out, but I think that this is how it happens. You engage in relationships with people who are other than struggle, who are other than what you consider to be ugly. Now, I don't think that black women are ugly. I have beautiful black sisters. My mother is black. I don't think, and my aunt, you know what I mean? Like, I think black women are beautiful. But I think that our community says that we're not beautiful. I mean, I had a hard time being a dark-skinned boy, and it was really difficult. And we don't value that. And so this problem comes out of this value, which is whiteness, or at least which is being phenotypically white. And so the question arises, I think, well, what should black women do in situations like this? I don't know what to do. I think that our community really just needs self-love. it's hard to love somebody who doesn't love themselves. And when you have a history like ours is, whether you're an African person from the continent of Africa, or an African person from around the diaspora, it's hard to love yourself when everything says not to love yourself. And so when we see this sort of attrition of black men not wanting to date black women, and I don't think that that's a majority, by the way. I think it speaks to economic status. I think it speaks to internalized racism, and I think that that's the problem. I'd like to say to go into this question of black women have bad attitudes. I don't think that this is the case. I think that you can find loads of women who have bad attitudes, regardless of their race or ethnicity. I think you can find loads of women who have bad attitudes. So I don't think it's attitudes. I think that that's an excuse. That's definitely an excuse. But I think that you might start making excuses when you feel like the decision that you made is going to be a hard-fought decision. And I think that it's a hard-fought decision is not necessarily bad, because I think that if you can start thinking about it and you can start thinking about these things, you can come better off. And so we're at a point where we've actually got to start making decisions about these things. We've got to start thinking about these things, and we've got to start talking about these things. And we've got to start talking about the love in our communities. Black men don't date white women or marry white women exclusively because black women are bad. They oftentimes say it. They cite that as a reason, but that's not true. We date it because black men date white women because there's a high degree of suffering in our community, and that suffering is economic, and it turns into a lot of social oppressions. And those are the things that, as a community, we've got to sort of legislate on, and we've got to decide as different directions, or there's going to be no end to this sort of attrition. Now, I'm not against interracial dating or marriage or anything else like that. But what I am against is the sort of self-loathing and the backfighting that we have in our community. And these images are the images that force, I won't say force, but they easily persuade people who are trying to survive away from these things. I mean, like when you talk about evolution, you talk about isolation of gene pools and finding the right equipment to survive. And so right now, black men, many black men, not all black men, think that the right equipment is the white equipment. And that's a fact. And I don't think that that's true. I think that the right equipment is whoever is best for you. And I think that that's something we're missing. And I don't think that those can be healthy choices when we have such sort of self-loathing in our communities. And it's not the fault of black women. And it's not the fault of black men. But what is our fault is that we haven't been able to sort of look at ourselves, and we haven't been able to come up with something which sort of alleviates these things. But the last thing I want to talk about is stress. In our communities, we have great amounts of stress. And so when we talk about the attitudes of black women, if these are true, it's because of stress. And black women have the same attitudes that black men have, because we are highly stressed. We need to take moments to relieve our stress. We need to find things to sort of relieve our stress and to look at ourselves. Because I think that when you have all this sort of stress, it's easy to be self-deprecating. It's easy to sort of cling to things that are superficial, like skin color and hair color and things like that, and not sort of look inward and at what's good. So we need to find avenues to to deal with our stress and manage our stress. Because I think that when you have children pick up on those stressors. This is what I'm talking about, black men leaving sort of our communities and things like that, because we pick up on these stressors and we say we don't want that for ourselves. And so I think we need to find ways of alleviating our stress along with sort of finding self-love. But I think that this is part of finding self-love, is finding ways to sort of de-stress and think about things. Stress is the reason our children don't always do well in school. It's because they can't think about things when they have so many problems and the home life is so tumultuous. When you have people who have to constantly lock up their doors with 10 bolts running up the doors, when they have to hide everything, when the houses get broken in and people steal everything, they have to worry about gunshots. Stress is going to happen, but we've got to find ways to escape those things. And I'm not talking about escapism like drugs. I'm talking about we have to find ways to relax, because our children pick up on this, and these are the sort of things that affect our young men and they affect our young women negatively. And so if we want to talk about the attitudes of black women and the attitudes of black men, well, they come from our stresses. And I'm not saying that we're the cause of our stress, but we do have to find ways to de-stress, because I think we're in a tough time right now. I think that we're in a very tough time right now, and that there's this back and forth about whether black men are faithful to the community, and that there's love in the community is just a product of those stressors. And I think that if we can find ways to alleviate the tape cut off, but I was saying that we need to find ways to alleviate our stress, because these are the things that are eventually going to allow us to see ourselves more humanly and more righteously, and in a healthier fashion. And this is the kind of thing that will stop the sort of back and forth bickering and the derision in our communities. And so I'm going to sum it up by saying what I said in the beginning. Why black men date and marry white women exclusively is because black men don't want the stress, no more than black women want the stress. Black men associate black women with struggle, and they associate blackness with something that's undesirable, because that's what our community says. Now, I don't believe that black women are struggle. I don't believe that our communities are filled with people who are not attractive or anything else like that. But I think that changing these mindsets will sort of change the dynamics of relationships in our communities.